But one of the things the ship is most famous for, I'm looking towards the stern at the helicopter hangar door. It's closed. There's some machinery and some signal flags and things on the deck there. But I mentioned that this ship was the test ship for Canadian technology, and one of the things that Canada was famous for was to be able to handle the large Sea King helicopters. When this helicopter came to land on a moving ship, they used a thing called the bear trap, which is what you're looking at now. The helicopter would hover over the ship, drop a cable. This would close on the cable, in other words, latching onto it. And the helicopter would then winch itself down onto the helicopter deck of the ship. And then the whole rig would run with the bear trap right inside this hangar. This compartment, just to give you an idea, is probably 30 feet high. See some of the markings on cabinets and things. These markings are fairly standard in the NATO fleet. Throughout the ship you'll find some unique artwork as well on the bulkheads. Some is a little tamer than others. Of course, all of this work is unique to each of the ships. Just want to give you an idea that there are a number of passageways that you'll be able to use. This in particular is the firefighting station where the firemen would stand with the doors closed while a helicopter landed. And I understand that if there was an accident or the helicopter crashed, they had a foaming fire system that could be used and would suppress the fire for about 2 minutes, allowing the rescue crew to get the helicopter crew off. And then they had the ability to then throw the helicopter off the side of the ship before it reignited. I mentioned that the group that owns the ship and the port is the Artificial Reef. This ship is the HMCS Saguenay, which was a sister ship of the Fraser and was our first project, which we scuttled in 1994 in Lunenburg Bay, about 10 miles from here. What's a unique experience that's happening is groups are coming to visit the Fraser, walk about, and they have even overnighted on board, and then they go over to Lunenburg and spend a few days diving on this unique shipwreck. And this ship is very similar to the ship that was scuttled or accidentally scuttled in San Diego last weekend. That was the HMCS Yukon. Just wanted to give you an idea of what the ship looked like when she's fully equipped with the helicopter on board. This is another sister which is long gone. She was sold for scrap and broken on the shores of India. It's the HMCS Marguerite. And this is a print that's actually in the bulkhead in the wardroom. The wardroom being where all the officers met, had their meals, and had their leisure time, and of course there was a bar on board. This is the wardroom, and of course all the officers were invited to use the wardroom. The chief executive officer was the president, and only the captain had to be invited to come into the wardroom because he has his own living quarters above. The captain would be invited perhaps to come and watch a film at night or in a special function. The ship had its own sick bay, but one of the alternative functions of the wardroom was a backup sick bay. And they would, you can tell that this is the area that they would use for mending damaged sailors. Those lights, of course, are the emergency operating lights that would kick on if the main lighting failed. And of course what they would do is they would turn this boardroom table, turn it sideways, and it would become an operating table. And this is the wardroom bar. Of course, the wardroom officers would have their own steward. The chief steward would probably be in charge of the bar. The significance of the one blast sign, of course, is the nuclear blast testing that was going on board here in the mid-60s. This is a passageway that runs from the forecastle through to the weather deck. The openings on the left-hand side, or the port side, are senior officers' quarters, and the wardroom is on the starboard side or the right side. Of course, that's why the hats are hanging there, because if you wore your hat into the wardroom accidentally, you had to buy a round of drinks for everybody that was there. This is very typical of a senior officer's quarters. It would be his day cabin, and that bunk pulls down from a seat into a bunk at night. The only thing missing is the carpets that they would put aboard, and we have those carpets removed temporarily. Senior officers were lucky enough to have their own porthole, of which there's not very many on board. If you were lucky enough to be the captain, you had your own quarters directly above the wardroom. You had obviously a sitting and an eating and entertaining area. You did have a television, of course. That's an electric fireplace. Another ship that we were aboard had an electric fireplace with a built-in 8-track player. This one seems to have been modernized. And off the captain's living quarters, of course, he had his own private sleeping quarters, which is very similar in size and design to the senior officer's quarters. And if you were a VIP on board, also connected to the captain's quarters, there was this small day cabin, of which, of course, any VIPs who stayed on board as a guest to the captain were given these quarters. Throughout the ship are small compartments such as this being the weapons officer's, well, I'd like to say workshop, probably office. And most of this equipment has remained on board, although most of it is just shells. The electronics have been taken out behind the machinery. This is the ops room, or the operations room, and most of the equipment on the original ship is here. I think you'll find again it's very typical of equipment on all NATO ships, and this is where the captain would actually fight the ship. You're looking at the in the very far end there, the gunnery control. And a little further around you're looking at aircraft monitoring. Adjacent to the operations room is the electronic warfare room, and I understand that most of this equipment is authentic and would have been the equipment being used in the 70s and 80s into the early 90s on any NATO ship. Directly up from the operations room is the bridge. This bridge actually suffered water damage during its storage before we moved it down here. So the local Sea Cadet Corps, which are the little guys, have come aboard and have started to clean the equipment off and take the floor up. But again, I think you'll find that most of this gear is fairly authentic and fairly typical to NATO ships. Sorry for the garbage can. It's just proof that work is being done.